Welcome back to Fluent English Journey. Today, I want to tell you a story. A story about truth, lies, and the quiet power of being honest, even when it hurts. So, sit back. Close your eyes if you like. Listen carefully, not just to the words, but to the feelings between them. Because today's story is called Honesty is the Best Policy. It begins on a cold morning in a small town. The streets were still half asleep, covered with a thin white fog. A young man named Daniel walked quickly down the narrow road that led to the school where he worked as an assistant teacher. He was only 23, kind, quiet, and very careful about everything he did. He believed in being perfect, in doing everything right. But that morning, something inside him was not right. He felt a small, sharp pain in his chest, not from the cold, but from something he didn't want to face. He was hiding a secret. You see, 2 days before, Daniel had made a mistake. A small mistake, maybe, but one that could cause big trouble. He had taken a student's project home to check it. It was a science project, a model volcano. But as he was carrying it home, he dropped it by accident. It broke. The paper was torn, the small plastic tubes were crushed. It wasn't completely destroyed, but it was badly damaged. Daniel panicked. He didn't tell anyone. He stayed up all night trying to fix it with glue, tape, and paint. He tried to make it look new again. When he finished, it looked almost the same, but not perfect. He told himself, no one will notice. It's fine. It's just a small thing. But deep inside, he knew that wasn't true. That morning, as he walked to school, that small voice in his mind whispered again and again, "You should tell the truth." He shook his head, trying to push it away. He thought, if I tell the truth, maybe they'll be angry. Maybe they'll think I'm careless. He wanted to be seen as responsible, smart, and perfect. And so, he kept walking, pretending nothing happened. When he reached the school, he smiled at everyone as usual. "Good morning," he said softly to the students. But his smile didn't feel real. It was like a mask. A mask that slowly became heavier with every passing minute. During the first class, the student whose project he had broken, a little boy named Sam, came running to him, full of excitement. "Mr. Daniel, did you check my volcano? Did it work?" Daniel froze for a moment. His heart started to race. He nodded quickly and said, "Yes, Sam. It was great. You did a very good job." Sam smiled brightly, proud and happy. Daniel felt something twist inside his chest, guilt. He had just lied. A small lie. But it was like planting a seed in his heart, a seed that would slowly grow heavier and darker with time. At lunch break, Daniel sat alone in the teacher's room. He couldn't eat. He just stared at his sandwich, thinking about what he had done. The sound of children laughing outside made him feel even worse. How could they laugh so freely when he felt trapped by his own silence? He wanted to tell the truth, but he didn't know how. The lie had already started its journey, and he was afraid that if he spoke now, everything would fall apart. Later that afternoon, the school principal, Mrs. Collins, came into the room. She was a kind woman in her 50s, with silver hair and a gentle smile. "Daniel," she said, "I'm glad you're here. We're planning to display the students' projects this weekend for the parents. Could you please check all of them and make sure they're ready?" Daniel nodded quickly. "Of course," he said, pretending to sound calm. But inside, his thoughts were loud. Oh no. What if someone notices Sam's project? What if they see the damage? That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He turned in bed again and again. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sam's smiling face. He heard his own voice saying, "It was great." The lie replayed in his head like a song he couldn't stop. He whispered to himself, "It's okay. I'll fix it before the display. I'll repaint it, make it look perfect. Then no one will ever know." But deep inside, He already knew the truth. No amount of paint could fix the guilt. The next morning, he went to school early. The hall was quiet, filled with the smell of chalk and paper. He went straight to the project room and took Sam's volcano out of the box. He began to fix it again, carefully repainting the sides, adding small paper trees, and covering the cracks. As he worked, he kept talking to himself. It's not really lying. I'm just protecting him from being sad. It's for the child's happiness, he said softly. But his voice sounded weak, almost like he was trying to convince himself. As he was finishing, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned quickly. It was Mrs. Collins. "Oh, Daniel. You're here early," she said warmly. "Yes," Daniel smiled, "just making sure everything's ready." She looked at the volcano and smiled. "Oh, that one's beautiful. Sam is such a creative boy." Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, he is. He wanted to tell her everything at that moment. The truth was sitting right at the edge of his tongue. He could almost say it. Almost. But then Mrs. Collins said, "We're lucky to have someone as responsible as you here, Daniel." And just like that, the words disappeared. He smiled again, hiding his storm. When Sam arrived later, he ran to see his project. "Wow, it looks even better," he said. Daniel forced a smile. "Yes, it's perfect now." And again, another lie. Each time, his heart felt a little heavier. The day passed slowly. The sun moved across the window, casting long shadows on the floor. Daniel corrected papers, helped students, and tried to act normal. But inside, he felt like he was carrying a secret box that was slowly opening on its own. He wanted to throw it away. He wanted to tell someone. But he didn't. That evening, as he walked home, the town looked peaceful, golden lights, quiet streets, the smell of bread from a nearby bakery. Everything around him looked simple, calm, and honest. And that made him feel even more dishonest. He stopped by a small lake near his house. He looked at his reflection in the water. The face looking back at him looked tired, not from work, but from worry. He whispered to his reflection, "Why can't I just say the truth?" The wind moved across the water, making his reflection tremble. It was like the water was answering, "Because you're afraid." Daniel closed his eyes. He remembered something his father used to tell him when he was a child. "Son, honesty is not about being perfect. It's about being brave." He had forgotten that. He thought honesty meant never making mistakes. But maybe it meant something else, something deeper. He didn't know yet, but he was going to learn. That night, before sleeping, Daniel wrote in his small journal something he did every night to clear his mind. He wrote, "I broke Sam's project. I lied. I'm scared to tell the truth. But this fear is eating me from inside. I don't know what to do." He looked at the words for a long time. Then he closed the book, put it on his desk, and turned off the light. The room was dark, silent. But in that silence, his heart was still talking. He knew something had to change. He just didn't know when or how. Sometimes, we think a small lie will protect us. We think it will make life easier. But lies don't disappear, they wait. They stay inside us, like a quiet shadow that follows us everywhere. And sooner or later, we have to face them. The next morning came quietly. The sky was gray and the air smelled of rain. Daniel walked to school again. The same road, the same people, but something felt different inside him. It was like he was carrying an invisible stone in his pocket, small, but heavy. Every step he took made it press a little harder against his heart. That stone was his lie. When he entered the classroom, everything looked normal. Children were laughing, chatting, playing with their pencils. The walls were full of colorful posters, bright, happy drawings made by the students. But Daniel couldn't enjoy any of it. He felt separated, like he was behind a glass wall, watching life, but not part of it. He said softly, "Good morning, everyone, but his voice sounded empty, almost like a whisper that didn't belong to him. He started the lesson, but his mind was far away. He couldn't stop thinking about the broken project, the lie, and Sam's smile. He kept hearing Sam's voice in his head. Did it work? That simple question replayed again and again, and every time, Daniel felt smaller. When class ended, he sat at his desk and looked out the window. Rain had started to fall slow, thin drops hitting the glass. Each drop slid down slowly, like tiny tears on a window's face. He thought, maybe this is what guilt feels like, something small that never stops falling. Just then, Mrs. Collins appeared at the door. "Daniel," she said kindly, "could you help me move the projects to the main hall this afternoon? We'll start preparing for the parent exhibition tomorrow." Daniel nodded automatically. "Of course," he said. But his hands felt cold. He knew what that meant. Soon, everyone would see the projects. Soon, his lie would be standing right there, under the bright lights, for everyone to see. He spent the next few hours helping the children with their work. But no matter what he did, his eyes kept moving toward the corner of the room, to the small table where Sam's volcano stood. It looked beautiful now, standing proudly among the other projects. No one could tell it had ever been broken. No one except Daniel. Every time he looked at it, his heart beat faster. It wasn't just a project anymore. It had become a reminder of his silence. At lunch, Daniel sat in the teacher's lounge again. He held his cup of tea, but didn't drink. He stared at the steam rising, thinking about something his mother used to say: "A lie may hide the truth for a while, but it cannot make it disappear." He smiled sadly. How many times had he told his students to be honest? He remembered saying, "Always tell the truth, even if it's hard." But now he was the one hiding. Later that day, Sam came running into the lounge with excitement. "Mr. Daniel," he said, almost out of breath. "My dad said he's coming tomorrow to see my volcano. He said he can't wait." Daniel's heart dropped. "Your dad," he said slowly. "Yes," Sam grinned. "He always says I'm not good at science, but this time he'll see. He'll be proud of me." Daniel smiled weakly. "That's wonderful, Sam." But inside, his thoughts were shouting, what if Sam's dad sees the damage? What if he asks questions? What if Sam finds out I lied? As Sam left the room, Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He could feel his chest tighten, his pulse quicken. He whispered to himself, "Why didn't I just tell the truth from the beginning?" But there was no answer. Only silence. After school, Daniel stayed late again. He told Mrs. Collins he wanted to make sure everything was ready for the display. The hallway was quiet, the classrooms empty. Only the sound of the rain outside filled the space. He walked to the table where the projects were arranged. He ran his fingers gently over the surface of Sam's volcano. The paint was dry now. Smooth, bright, beautiful. But he knew underneath there were cracks. And maybe that's how his life felt right now. Beautiful on the outside, cracked on the inside. He sat on a chair nearby, staring at it for a long time. Then he said softly, almost like he was talking to the volcano itself, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break you. I just didn't want to disappoint anyone." He laughed quietly at himself. "Talking to a project now, Daniel? You really are losing it." But maybe he wasn't crazy. Maybe he just needed to say the words out loud, even if no one else could hear. That night, when he went home, he saw a message on his phone from his sister. She had sent a photo of their old family house. He smiled. It reminded him of his childhood, simple, honest days when he didn't worry about mistakes. He remembered once, when he was 10 years old, he accidentally broke his father's favorite mug. He had cried and hidden the pieces under the bed. But when his father found out, he didn't get angry. He just said, "I'm proud of you for telling me the truth." and they had glued the mug back together, piece by piece. It was never perfect again, but it was full of love. Why couldn't he be that brave now? Daniel looked at the photo again. The memory brought a quiet warmth to his chest. He whispered, "Maybe tomorrow. I'll tell the truth tomorrow." He closed his eyes and tried to believe it. But the word tomorrow sounded weak, like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The next morning, the sun came out for the first time in days. It was the day of the exhibition. Children came to school early, dressed neatly, excited to show their parents what they had made. The hallway buzzed with laughter and footsteps. Mrs. Collins walked around with a clipboard, checking every table, every label. Parents started arriving, smiling proudly as they looked at their children's work. Daniel stood near the back of the hall, watching nervously. His hands were shaking slightly. He tried to smile, but his stomach felt heavy. Then he saw Sam, standing next to his project with his father. The man was tall, with a serious face. He bent down, looked at the volcano carefully, and nodded. "This is very good, son," he said. Sam smiled widely. "Mr. Daniel helped me. He said it worked perfectly." Daniel froze. His heart stopped for a moment. Sam's father turned to him and said, "Oh, you're Mr. Daniel? Thank you for helping my boy. You're a good teacher." Daniel forced a smile. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to tell the truth right there, but fear held him back like invisible chains. After the exhibition, when the parents left, Daniel stayed behind again. He helped clean up, picking up papers, closing boxes, turning off lights. But his mind was far away. He kept hearing Sam's voice, "Mr. Daniel helped me." The words should have made him proud, but instead, they hurt. He didn't help. He lied. Mrs. Collins noticed something was wrong. She walked over and said gently, "Daniel, are you all right? You look pale." He looked up at her, tried to smile. "I'm fine. Just a bit tired," he said. She nodded. "You've been working hard. Go home and rest. You've done a wonderful job." When she left, Daniel sat on a small bench by the door. He felt empty. He whispered to himself, "Wonderful job? I can't even be honest." He took out his journal from his bag and wrote again, "The truth is heavier now. It's following me everywhere. I thought lying would make things easier. But it's harder. Much harder." He closed the book and looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were opening, and a soft light touched the trees outside. He whispered, "Maybe it's time." Maybe the time to stop hiding had finally come. That night, as he lay in bed, he imagined what it would be like to tell the truth. Would Sam be angry? Would Mrs. Collins lose trust in him? Maybe. But maybe, just maybe, they would understand. Because people don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to be real. As he drifted to sleep, Daniel made a quiet promise to himself. "Tomorrow, I will speak the truth." No more hiding. He didn't know what would happen. He didn't know how others would react. But for the first time in days, he felt a little lighter. Not free yet, but lighter. Music rises softly, hopeful tone. Because sometimes, the hardest thing is not to face others, it's to face yourself. And when you finally decide to be honest, even the air around you starts to feel different, cleaner, softer, brighter. Daniel didn't know it yet, but this decision would change everything. The next morning would bring the most difficult and the most beautiful moment of his life. The next day began with sunlight streaming through the curtains. It was a bright morning, clear and gentle. For the first time in a long while, Daniel woke up early, not because of worry, but because of a quiet decision growing in his heart. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, breathing slowly. He whispered, "Today, I'll tell the truth." The words felt heavy, but also clean. Like opening a window after a long storm. He got ready slowly. Washed his face, combed his hair, put on his simple gray shirt. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw the same face, tired eyes, calm smile, but something inside felt different. The mirror looked back at him, silently asking, "Are you ready?" He nodded. "Yes," he said softly. "I'm ready." He didn't know exactly how it would happen, or what words he would use, but he knew one thing: he couldn't keep living with a lie inside his heart. When he arrived at school, the morning felt fresh and new. Children were running around, laughing. Sam waved from the playground. "Good morning, Mr. Daniel." Daniel waved back, his heart tightening a little. That simple smile reminded him of what was at stake: trust, innocence, kindness. He didn't want to lose it. But he didn't want to hide anymore either. During the first class, he found it hard to concentrate. He read from the textbook, but his voice drifted. He kept thinking, when should I tell them? During lunch? After class? Should I tell Mrs. Collins first? The questions swirled in his mind like leaves in the wind. Then a thought came quietly: maybe I need to understand honesty myself before I try to explain it. That thought stayed with him. After lunch, he walked to the school garden, a quiet place behind the classrooms where few people went. It was small but peaceful, filled with flowers and an old wooden bench. He sat there, closing his eyes for a moment. The air smelled of jasmine. The world felt slow and soft. He whispered, "What does it really mean to be honest?" Just then, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Mr. Harris, the art teacher, walking by. He was an older man, always calm, always smiling, with paint stains on his shirt and kind eyes full of stories. He saw Daniel sitting alone and said, "Mind if I join you?" Daniel nodded. "Of course," he said. Mr. Harris sat down beside him, holding a cup of coffee. They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the birds. Then Mr. Harris said quietly, "You look troubled, Daniel. Is everything all right?" Daniel smiled weakly. "I'm fine," he said. But the lie tasted bitter the moment it left his tongue. Mr. Harris looked at him kindly. "You know, I've been a teacher for 30 years. I can tell when someone's not fine." Daniel sighed. "I guess you're right." He looked down at his hands. "I made a mistake. A small one. But I lied to cover it." Mr. Harris nodded slowly, not surprised. He said softly, "Everyone makes mistakes. But lies, even small ones, have long legs. They travel far." Daniel looked up, curious. "Long legs?" he asked. Mr. Harris chuckled. "Yes. A lie walks faster than truth. It reaches people before the truth can catch up. But when truth finally arrives, it never leaves." Daniel smiled slightly. "That's true." Then his face grew serious. "I broke one of my students' projects. It was an accident. I fixed it. I thought it was okay. But I lied. I told him it was perfect. And now, I can't stop thinking about it." Mr. Harris nodded again. "That's because your heart knows what your mind is trying to forget." Daniel looked at him. "Do you think I should tell them? The principal, the student?" Mr. Harris took a sip of his coffee and said, "That depends. What do you want to learn from this?" Daniel frowned a little. "Learn?" "Yes," said Mr. Harris. "Mistakes are lessons wearing heavy clothes. You can carry them forever, or you can open them and see what they're teaching you." Daniel was quiet. Then he said, "I think I want to learn courage. I want to be brave enough to tell the truth." Mr. Harris smiled. "Then you already have your answer." They sat together in silence again. The wind moved gently through the trees. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that teaches you something without words. After a while, Daniel stood up. "Thank you," he said. "You helped me more than you know." Mr. Harris smiled again. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise one thing: don't be too hard on yourself. We all fall. What matters is how we stand again." Daniel nodded, his eyes soft. He felt lighter, like something inside him had quietly opened. He looked up at the sky, a deep blue with slow white clouds. For the first time, he smiled honestly. Later that afternoon, as the students packed their bags, Sam came to Daniel's desk. "Mr. Daniel," he said, "my dad really liked my volcano. He said it looked amazing. Thank you for helping me." Daniel looked at the boy, small, bright, full of trust. He smiled gently. "Sam, can we talk after class? Just for a few minutes." Sam nodded, curious. "Sure." When everyone else had left, Daniel sat down next to Sam's desk. He took a slow breath. His hands were trembling slightly. He said, "Sam, I want to tell you something important. It's about your project." The boy looked up, eyes wide. "What is it?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "I made a mistake. The day I took your project home to check it, I accidentally dropped it. It broke a little. I tried to fix it, but I didn't tell you the truth. I said it was perfect, but it wasn't. I'm really sorry." For a few seconds, the room was silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. He waited for anger, for disappointment, but instead, Sam just blinked. "You broke it," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yes. I'm sorry, Sam. I should have told you right away. I didn't want to make you sad, but lying made it worse." Sam looked down at his desk, thinking. Then he said softly, "It's okay, Mr. Daniel." Daniel looked surprised. "It's okay." Sam nodded. "Yes. You fixed it. It looks even better now. And you told me the truth. My dad says telling the truth is brave." Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. He smiled gently. "Your dad is a wise man." Sam grinned. "I know." Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the tightness in his chest slowly fade. The truth was out, and instead of anger, he found forgiveness. It felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. Later, when Mrs. Collins came into the room, Daniel walked up to her. "Mrs. Collins," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked at him, concerned. "What is it, Daniel?" He told her everything from the accident to the lie, to finally telling Sam the truth. When he finished, there was silence. Mrs. Collins looked at him for a moment, then smiled gently. "Thank you for being honest," she said. "That's what matters most. We all make mistakes, but when we admit them, we grow." Her words were soft, but they felt strong, like a warm light after darkness. Daniel nodded slowly. "I was afraid you'd be disappointed," he said. Mrs. Collins shook her head. "No, Daniel. I'm proud of you. You didn't hide forever. That's what courage looks like." For the rest of the day, Daniel walked through the school feeling lighter. The air felt cleaner. The colors around him seemed brighter. He realized something: the truth didn't break him. It freed him. That evening, he went back to the lake, the same place where he once asked his reflection, "Why can't I tell the truth?" Now, when he looked at the water, his reflection looked different. Calmer. Braver. He said softly, "I told the truth." The reflection smiled back. And for the first time in days, he felt peace. Soft music fades in, warm, emotional tone. Sometimes, we think honesty will make us lose people. But often, it makes us closer. It helps us see who we are and helps others see the real us too. It's not about being perfect. It's about being true. So, when you listen to this story, remember this simple phrase: honesty builds trust. Say it with me slowly: honesty builds trust. Because it's true, every honest word creates a bridge between hearts. And that bridge never breaks. For a few days after Daniel told the truth, everything felt peaceful. He felt lighter, freer, like a window had finally opened inside him. He smiled more. He slept better. And for the first time, he looked forward to coming to school. But peace doesn't always last forever. Sometimes, honesty brings light. And light can also show the shadows we didn't expect to see. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Daniel was preparing lessons in the classroom after school. The sunlight was soft, golden, touching the edges of the desks. The students had gone home, and the hallways were quiet. He was writing notes on the board when the door suddenly opened. Mrs. Collins walked in, but her expression was different this time. She looked serious, not angry, but deeply thoughtful. "Daniel," she said slowly, "can we talk for a moment?" He turned, smiling politely. "Of course, Mrs. Collins." She closed the door behind her and said, "I had a call from Sam's father today." Daniel's smile faded slightly. "Oh," he said quietly. "Yes," she continued. "He said Sam told him about the broken project and about how you were honest with him." Daniel nodded slowly, his heartbeat quickening. "Yes, I told him the truth." Mrs. Collins crossed her arms gently. "I understand, Daniel. I respect that you told the truth. But Sam's father was disappointed." "Disappointed?" Daniel repeated, surprised. "Yes," she said softly. "He felt that the school should have told him right away when the accident happened. He said he trusted us to take care of the students' work." Daniel looked down, guilt returning like a cold wave. "I see," he whispered. Mrs. Collins sighed, walking closer. "Daniel, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not angry. You did the right thing, finally. But you must understand something important. Honesty sometimes has a price. Even when your heart is pure, your actions can still have consequences." Daniel nodded silently. He could feel his throat tightening. The small peace he had found was slowly turning into worry again. "I'll speak with Sam's father personally," Mrs. Collins said kindly. "But for now, take this as a lesson, not a punishment. You're a good teacher, Daniel. You care. But caring also means facing difficult truths and accepting responsibility when things go wrong." He nodded again, quietly. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft. She gave him a small smile and left the room. When the door closed, Daniel sat down at his desk. He stared at the empty classroom. The silence felt heavy again, not like before, but in a new way. He whispered to himself, "Even the truth can hurt." He looked at his hands, the chalk dust still on his fingers. He thought about how simple life seemed when he believed that telling the truth would fix everything. Now he realized the truth doesn't fix everything. It simply reveals everything. That night, Daniel walked home slowly. The streetlights glowed softly, and the air was cool. He passed the small bakery, the lake, the park where children used to play. Everything looked the same, yet his heart felt different, heavier again, but not from guilt this time. It was something else. Maybe disappointment. Maybe fear. He whispered, "Why is it so hard to do the right thing?" When he reached home, he sat by the window and opened his journal again. He wrote, "I told the truth. I felt free. But now I see that honesty doesn't always make life easier. Sometimes it makes it harder. Maybe honesty isn't about comfort. Maybe it's about courage." He stopped writing and stared at the page. The ink from his pen looked darker than usual, like his thoughts had weight. Later that evening, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Harris, the art teacher. It said, "Heard about the call. Don't worry. Remember, storms come to test the roots of the tree, not to break it." Daniel smiled faintly. Mr. Harris always had a way with words. He replied, "Thank you. I'm trying to stay strong." And Mr. Harris wrote back simply, "You already are." Daniel put the phone down and leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes and thought about what courage really meant. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about staying truthful, even when truth hurts. The next morning at school, things felt quiet. Some teachers had heard about what happened. They didn't say much, but Daniel could feel their eyes curious, whispering silently. He smiled politely and continued his work. He didn't defend himself. He didn't hide. He just kept doing what he loved, teaching. During class, he noticed Sam sitting in the front row, drawing something on his notebook. After class, Sam walked up to him and said, "Mr. Daniel, I made this for you." He handed him a small drawing. It was of a volcano, but this time, it wasn't exploding. It was calm, with flowers growing around it. At the bottom, Sam had written, "Even when things break, they can grow again." Daniel stared at the drawing, his throat tightening. He smiled softly. "Thank you, Sam. This means more than you know." Sam smiled shyly and ran off to join his friends. Daniel looked at the paper for a long time. He whispered, "Even when things break, they can grow again." It was true, not just for projects or objects, but for people too. He realized that maybe honesty wasn't about avoiding pain. Maybe it was about learning how to grow after it. That afternoon, Mrs. Collins called him into her office again. She said gently, "Daniel, I spoke with Sam's father. He understands now. He said he respects that you were honest in the end. He was just surprised, that's all." Daniel nodded, relieved. Mrs. Collins continued, "He even said something I think you'll appreciate. He said, 'At least my son learned that adults can make mistakes and say sorry.'" Daniel smiled for the first time that day. "That means a lot," he said quietly. Mrs. Collins nodded warmly. "You see, Daniel? Sometimes honesty looks like a problem at first. But later, it becomes a lesson, not just for you, but for others too." He nodded again. "Yes," he said softly. "I'm beginning to understand that." When he left her office, he felt a strange calmness, the kind that comes after a storm passes. The world looked new again. He could hear the sound of laughter in the hallway, the light tapping of shoes on the floor, the smell of fresh paint from the art room. Everything felt alive. That evening, Daniel met Mr. Harris again in the garden. The old teacher was painting the sunset orange, gold, and pink, brushing the sky. Daniel stood beside him, watching quietly. Mr. Harris said, without turning, "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Peaceful too." Mr. Harris nodded. "You know, Daniel, honesty is like painting. You can't fix every mistake. Sometimes, you just add new colors around it until it becomes something beautiful." Daniel smiled. "I like that," he said. "Maybe that's what happened here." Mr. Harris chuckled softly. "Exactly. You turned a broken thing into something that teaches." They stood in silence, watching the sun slowly disappear behind the trees. And in that silence, Daniel felt something deep inside, a quiet strength, a peace that didn't come from being perfect, but from being real. He realized something very important that day: being honest doesn't protect you from pain. It connects you to truth, and truth helps you grow. It's not always easy, but it's always right. So, if you're listening to this story now, remember, even when honesty feels hard, it's the beginning of real strength. Because truth doesn't destroy. It cleans. It clears the path for trust, forgiveness, and growth. Repeat after me slowly. The truth may hurt for a moment, but lies hurt forever. Say it again, clearly, with meaning. The truth may hurt for a moment, but lies hurt forever. Beautiful. Now take a deep breath. Because in the next part of our story, Daniel's life begins to change in quiet, beautiful ways as the truth continues to shape who he is and how he sees the world. This is the moment when pain turns into peace. Sometimes, when we tell the truth, the world doesn't change immediately. People don't always smile. The sky doesn't suddenly turn blue. But something small begins to shift deep inside us, like a seed opening in the dark. And slowly, life begins to grow again. For Daniel, the days after his talk with Mrs. Collins and Sam's father felt different. There was less fear now. He didn't worry about who knew his mistake. He didn't replay the story in his mind again and again. Instead, he focused on what he could do next. He started to repair, not the model, but the trust he had broken. One morning, as he entered the classroom, he saw Sam waiting by the window. The boy turned and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Daniel." "Good morning, Sam," Daniel replied, smiling warmly. Sam hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "My dad told me he's proud that you said sorry." Daniel blinked in surprise. "He said that?" Sam nodded. "He told me that saying sorry is what brave people do." Daniel's heart softened. He smiled and said, "Your dad is a wise man." Sam grinned. "He said you're brave too." For the first time in many weeks, Daniel laughed, really laughed. It wasn't loud, just real. The kind of laugh that comes from relief and kindness mixed together. And in that small moment, the classroom didn't feel like a place of mistakes anymore. It felt like a place of healing. That day, he decided to do something different. He asked all the students to put away their books. "We're going to try something new," he said. The students looked curious. Daniel walked to the board and wrote 3 words in big letters: honesty, mistakes, growth. He turned to them and said, "Today, we'll talk about these 3 words. What do they mean to you?" A few hands slowly went up. Lily said, "Honesty means telling the truth, even when you're scared." Daniel smiled. "That's beautiful, Lily." Then another boy said, "Mistakes are when you do something wrong." "Yes," Daniel said. "And what about growth?" "Growth," said Sam softly, "means learning from it." Daniel's eyes softened. He nodded slowly. "Exactly, Sam. That's the magic of honesty. It helps us grow, not by being perfect, but by being real." He asked them to close their eyes. "Now think of one time," he said, "when you made a mistake. Don't say it out loud. Just remember how it felt." The room was silent. Even the air felt still. Now think about what you learned from that moment. How it helped you grow even a little. He waited a few seconds. Then he whispered, "That's what honesty gives us. The chance to become better." When they opened their eyes, something was different. The room felt lighter. Even the sunlight seemed softer, warmer. Daniel smiled quietly and said, "You see? When we talk about truth, we don't lose anything. We gain peace." After class, some of the students stayed behind. They shared small stories about times they lied to their parents, or forgot homework, or blamed someone else. Daniel listened gently to each one, nodding, encouraging them to speak. He didn't judge. He didn't correct. He just listened. And that's when he realized something powerful. Honesty isn't only about speaking the truth. It's also about listening to the truth without fear, without pride. It's about giving space for others to be real too. Later that day, Daniel met Mr. Harris again in the art room. The smell of paint filled the air and brushes rested in glass jars like sleeping flowers. "Busy as always," Daniel said. Mr. Harris smiled. "Always. But tell me, how are you doing, my friend?" Daniel sat on a stool and said, "Better. Much better. I spoke to the class today about honesty." Mr. Harris nodded. "And what did they teach you?" Daniel chuckled softly. "That even children understand truth better than most adults." The old teacher laughed quietly. Wise words. The younger the heart, the clearer the truth. Daniel looked at one of the paintings on the wall, a wide field under a cloudy sky. "You know," he said, "I thought honesty would make life easier. But it doesn't. It just makes life clearer." Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "Clarity is better than comfort, Daniel. Comfort hides the problem. Clarity shows the way." Daniel thought for a moment, then said softly, "I think I'm beginning to see that." The days turned into weeks. Daniel continued teaching, and little by little, his confidence returned. He still made mistakes, everyone does, but now he faced them differently. When something went wrong, he spoke up immediately. He stopped hiding, stopped pretending. And surprisingly, People began to trust him more than ever. Students respected him not because he was perfect, but because he was honest. Parents appreciated him. Even Mrs. Collins began to give him more responsibility. It was as if the truth had become his strength, his new way of leading. One Friday afternoon, as the school prepared for the annual exhibition, Mrs. Collins asked Daniel to supervise the student art corner. "Are you sure?" he asked, smiling nervously. She laughed. "Yes, Daniel. You've earned this. I trust you completely." Her words filled him with quiet pride. It wasn't the kind of pride that shouts. It was the kind that smiles gently and says, "You made it through." That evening, Daniel stayed late to help the students set up their artwork. Sam was there too, carefully arranging his volcano model, the repaired one. It looked beautiful. The cracks were visible, but painted gold. Daniel asked, "Why gold?" Sam smiled. "Because my dad told me there's something in Japan called kintsugi. It means fixing broken things with gold, to show that the cracks are part of the story." Daniel's eyes widened. "That's amazing." Sam nodded proudly. "It means the break made it even more beautiful." Daniel felt something stir in his chest, a mix of joy and wonder. He whispered, "Yes, even more beautiful." When the exhibition opened the next day, parents walked through the hall, admiring the art and projects. Daniel stood by the volcano model, smiling as Sam explained his work to visitors. He listened quietly, remembering how this same project once caused so much pain, and now it was bringing people together. It was proof that honesty and courage can turn mistakes into masterpieces. Later, Mrs. Collins came up to him. "Daniel," she said softly, "I'm proud of you. This whole experience has made you a better teacher and a better person." He smiled humbly. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. I've learned more in these few weeks than I did in all my training." She nodded. "That's what life does. It teaches through truth." As the exhibition ended, Daniel stood outside, watching the sunset. The sky was golden again, just like the cracks on Sam's volcano. He took a deep breath and said quietly to himself, "Maybe that's what honesty really is. A kind of golden crack in our lives, showing where we've been hurt, but also where we've healed." He smiled. He wasn't afraid anymore. Because now he knew honesty didn't destroy him. It transformed him. And that's the power of truth, my friend. It doesn't always protect you from pain, but it protects you from regret. When you speak honestly, you may lose something small, a comfort, an easy path, but you gain something much greater, peace. Repeat slowly with me. Honesty doesn't always make life easy, but it always makes life clear. Again, clearly, honesty doesn't always make life easy, but it always makes life clear. Perfect. That's how you grow, not by being perfect, but by being real. It had been a few months since that day, the day Daniel told the truth, the day he learned what honesty really meant. Winter had slowly melted into spring. The trees around the school were covered in fresh green leaves. The sound of children laughing filled the courtyard again. Life had returned to its usual rhythm. But something was different now, something quiet, something good. Daniel's classroom had changed. It wasn't just a place where lessons were taught. It was a place where students felt safe to speak, to share their ideas, their mistakes, their truth. It had become a space filled with trust. Daniel often began his classes with a simple question. He would say, "What truth have you discovered this week?" And the students would smile and think. Some would say, "I learned that helping others makes me feel good." Others would say, "I learned that being late makes my mom worried." And sometimes they would say, "I learned that saying sorry is hard, but it makes my heart light." Each answer made Daniel smile. He saw that honesty wasn't just growing in him, it was growing in them too. One morning, Sam walked up to him with a nervous smile. "Mr. Daniel," he said, "I have to tell you something." Daniel put down his notebook and looked at him kindly. Yes, Sam. Sam hesitated. I broke one of the art brushes yesterday. It was an accident. I was cleaning it, and the handle snapped. Daniel looked at him quietly for a moment, then smiled. Thank you for telling me the truth, he said. Sam blinked in surprise. You're not angry? Daniel shook his head. No, I'm proud of you. Sam's face lit up with relief. Really? Of course, Daniel said softly. Honesty is the best policy, remember? Sam laughed. I learned it from you, Mr. Daniel. Daniel smiled, a deep, quiet smile. He realized something. Honesty was like a candle. When you light one candle, it can light many others, and together, they make the room brighter. That afternoon, Daniel sat in the teacher's lounge, sipping tea. Mrs. Collins entered with a few papers in her hand. She looked at him warmly. Daniel, I just wanted to say how proud I am of what you've done with your class. Daniel looked up surprised. Thank you, but what do you mean? She smiled. I've noticed the way your students speak. They're open, confident, and kind. They tell the truth even when it's small things. That's rare these days. Daniel felt a soft warmth spread through his chest. He said quietly, maybe they just needed someone to show them that honesty isn't scary. Mrs. Collins nodded. Exactly. You didn't just teach them English or science, Daniel. You taught them to be real. Daniel smiled and said, thank you. I guess. I just wanted to be the kind of teacher I needed when I was their age. Mrs. Collins smiled gently. And now you are. As the days passed, Daniel noticed that other teachers began doing the same. In the staff meetings, people spoke more openly. If something went wrong, they admitted it. If someone made a mistake, they apologized and fixed it without fear. It was small but real. Like ripples in water, honesty was spreading quietly through the school. One afternoon, Daniel received a small note in his desk drawer. It was from one of his students, Lily. It said, Dear Mr. Daniel, thank you for teaching us that it's okay to make mistakes. Because of you, I told my mom the truth about my test. She was sad at first, but then she hugged me and said she was proud I told her. Thank you for helping me be brave. Daniel held the paper for a long time. He didn't know what to say. His eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of quiet joy. He whispered, This is the real reward. That evening, as he walked home under the fading sunlight, he thought about how much his life had changed. He used to think honesty was just about right and wrong. Now he understood it was much deeper. Honesty was about connection, about building trust, one small truth at a time. He realized something beautiful. Every time we choose honesty, we invite others to be honest too. It's like saying, you can be yourself here. You don't have to hide. When Daniel reached his apartment, he sat by the window and looked out at the city lights. Each window was glowing softly, and he thought, every light is like a truth. Together, they make the city shine. He smiled to himself. A few days later, the school organized an event called the Day of Values. Each class had to present something about a moral lesson, kindness, patience, or teamwork. Mrs. Collins asked Daniel's class to represent honesty. At first, Daniel was unsure. Honesty? That's a big one, he said. Mrs. Collins smiled. Who better than you and your students to show what it means? So Daniel and the class began to plan. They decided to create a short play. It was simple, about a boy who lies to his friend, feels guilty, and finally tells the truth. The message was clear. Telling the truth may be hard, but it brings peace. The day of the event arrived. Parents, teachers, and students filled the school hall. The stage lights glowed softly, and the room buzzed with excitement. When it was their turn, Daniel's students stepped forward. Sam played the main role, the boy who lies and then learns the value of honesty. The play was beautiful. It wasn't perfect, some lines were forgotten, and one prop fell down, but the message was clear and heartfelt. When the play ended, the audience was quiet for a few seconds, then began to clap, slowly at first, and then loudly. Mrs. Collins smiled from the front row. Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. He felt proud, not of himself, but of the truth that had grown inside these children. After the applause, Sam walked up to the microphone and said softly, "Honesty is the best policy, not because it's easy, but because it makes us real." The crowd went silent again, and then clapped even louder. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. He thought, this is what it means to teach. After the event, a few parents came to him and said, "Your class was wonderful." One parent said, "I wish every teacher spoke about honesty like you do." Daniel smiled humbly and said, "Thank you, but they taught me too." That night, when he returned home, he opened his journal again. He wrote, "I once thought honesty was something we give to others, but now I know it's something we also give to ourselves. It sets us free. It makes our hearts quiet. It gives our lives light." He closed the book and looked out at the night sky. The stars were bright, scattered like tiny truths across the darkness. He whispered to himself, "Every truth I've told has brought me closer to peace." He smiled, because now he understood the real consequence of honesty isn't punishment. It's peace. And peace, once found, spreads like light from one heart to another. So, if you're listening to this now, remember, the consequences of honesty aren't always easy. Sometimes people misunderstand. Sometimes they get angry. But in time, truth always brings healing. Repeat this slowly with me. Honesty brings peace. Lies bring fear. Again, clearly, honesty brings peace. Lies bring fear. Beautiful. That's the lesson Daniel learned, and the one we can learn too. Because when you choose honesty, you choose light. And light always wins over darkness. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with sound or celebration. It comes quietly, like morning light touching your face. It doesn't shout, "You did it." It simply whispers, "You're okay now." For Daniel, that whisper came one early morning. He woke up before sunrise. The city was still sleeping, wrapped in silence. He made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the first golden light appear on the horizon. It was one of those peaceful mornings when everything feels new, not because the world has changed, but because you have. He looked at the cup in his hands and thought about how far he had come. Months ago, he was afraid to tell the truth, afraid to disappoint, afraid to face mistakes. Now, that fear was gone. In its place was calm, a calm built from honesty, from courage, from learning to let go. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "Peace doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being honest." When he reached school that day, the sky was bright blue. Children were laughing, birds were singing, and the garden near the entrance was full of yellow flowers. He stopped for a moment to breathe in the morning air. Everything felt lighter, inside and outside. Mrs. Collins greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, Daniel," she said. "Good morning," he replied, smiling back. She looked at him for a second and said, "You seem peaceful." Daniel laughed softly. "I guess I am." She nodded knowingly. That's what honesty does. It doesn't always give you success, but it always gives you peace. Daniel smiled again. "You're right." In class that day, he noticed the students were calmer too. Maybe they could feel the peace he carried, like warmth spreading through the room. When the heart of the teacher is calm, the class becomes calm too. He began the lesson by saying, "Today, I don't want you to write or read. I just want you to talk." The students looked surprised. "Talk about what?" Lily asked. Daniel smiled. "About life. About anything you want, something true." They began one by one. Sam said, "I feel happy because my dad comes home early now." Lily said, I'm learning to play guitar. It's hard, but I love it. Others shared small truths about their families, dreams, and even fears. And as each one spoke, Daniel realized something beautiful. Honesty was not just about right or wrong. It was about being real. It was about speaking from the heart. He looked around and said softly, "You're all so brave." You know why? They shook their heads. Because you're being honest. And when you speak honestly, you make the world a little kinder. The students smiled. It was a quiet moment, but full of meaning. Daniel could feel something deep, a connection between them all, built from truth and trust. After class, as the students left, Sam stayed behind again. He walked up and said shyly, "Mr. Daniel, do you ever feel afraid to tell the truth?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Yes," he said honestly. "Even now, sometimes I do. But then I remind myself, the truth might hurt for a while, but hiding it hurts forever." Sam nodded slowly. "That's what my mom says too." Daniel smiled. "Then your mom is a very wise woman." That evening, as the sun began to set, Daniel walked to the park near his apartment. He hadn't been there for a long time. The trees were tall and full of green. Children were playing. Old men sat on benches reading newspapers. And somewhere, a musician was playing a soft tune on a guitar. Daniel sat down and closed his eyes. He remembered the past, the guilt, the fear, the sleepless nights, and how far he had come since then. He remembered the look in Sam's eyes when he said thank you. He remembered Mrs. Collins' smile, the students' laughter, and the way honesty had quietly changed everything. He felt grateful, truly grateful. He whispered softly, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." He didn't know who he was thanking, maybe life, maybe truth itself, but he meant it. When he opened his eyes, he saw a little girl feeding birds nearby. She accidentally dropped her sandwich. For a moment, she looked around, worried, then picked it up and smiled shyly, whispering to herself, "Oops, my mistake." Daniel laughed quietly. Even a child could admit her small truth without fear. He thought, maybe honesty is natural. We just forget it as we grow older. He sat there until the sky turned orange and gold. Then he walked home slowly, feeling lighter with each step. That night, he opened his journal again and wrote, "Peace is not the absence of mistakes. It is the presence of truth." He paused and added, "When I stopped hiding, life started healing." He read those lines again and again. Then he closed the book, turned off the light, and fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, he received a surprise. When he arrived at school, Mrs. Collins called him into her office. "Daniel," she said with a smile, "I have some good news for you." He looked at her curiously. "What is it?" She handed him a letter. "You've been selected as the teacher of the month." Daniel blinked. "Me?" She laughed. "Yes, you. The students and parents voted for you. They said you inspire them to be honest and kind." Daniel felt his heart fill with warmth. I don't know what to say." Mrs. Collins smiled. "Say thank you. And keep doing what you're doing." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." He walked out of the office and stood by the hallway window, holding the letter. He looked outside, the morning sun shining over the playground, and smiled. He whispered to himself, maybe honesty was the best policy after all. He thought about everything that had happened, the broken project, the fear, the truth, the growth, and now this peace. Every step, every mistake, had led him here to this quiet moment of joy. He realized something profound. Peace doesn't come when life is perfect. Peace comes when your heart is true. When your words and your actions finally match. When you don't have to pretend anymore. So, my friend, if you're listening now, think about your own life. Have you ever hidden the truth because you were afraid? Have you ever told a small lie to protect yourself? We all have. But honesty, even when it's hard, gives your heart a quiet kind of strength. It builds trust. It brings calm. It connects you to others in a deeper way. Repeat after me slowly. When I am honest, I am free. Again, clearly. When I am honest, I am free. Now take a deep breath. Feel that truth inside you. That calm, peaceful feeling, that's honesty living inside your heart. Daniel learned that lesson not from books, but from experience. He learned that mistakes can break things, but honesty can heal them. He learned that courage is not shouting, it's speaking quietly, truthfully, even when your voice shakes. And he learned that peace is not found in perfection, but in truth. So, Daniel's story could have ended here, peaceful, calm, complete. But life has one more gift for him, a final reflection, a deeper understanding of what honesty really means, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. In our final section, you'll hear how Daniel looks back at his journey and shares what honesty taught him about life, love, and growth. This is where the story becomes a mirror, not just for Daniel, but for you too. Sometimes, when a story ends, it doesn't really end. It just becomes a part of who we are. The lessons stay. The feelings stay. And they whisper to us every time we face something similar again. Weeks passed after Daniel received the Teacher of the Month award. Life returned to its usual rhythm: classes, laughter, children's voices, the sound of pencils on paper. But inside him, something had changed forever. He no longer rushed through days the way he used to. He listened more. He smiled more. He felt more connected to his students, to his work, to himself. He had discovered something powerful, something no book or course had ever taught him. He had discovered that honesty is not just a rule, it's a way of being alive. Every time he looked at his students, he saw small reflections of his younger self. Curious, afraid, hopeful, learning, growing. And he understood something simple yet profound. When we teach others to be honest, we teach them to love themselves more deeply. One Friday afternoon, after school, Daniel stayed behind again. The classrooms were empty now. The sun was low, painting the floors with long orange shadows. He walked slowly between the desks, touching each one gently as he passed. He remembered all the faces that had sat there, laughing, learning, sharing their stories. He could still hear their voices, soft echoes in his memory. He stopped near the window, watching the golden light outside. Then he spoke softly, not to anyone, just to himself. "I used to think honesty was about right and wrong," he said. "But now I see, it's about connection. It's about trust. It's about love." He remembered the time he had lied about the broken project. It felt like a different life now. Back then, he thought a lie could protect him. But now he knew, every lie is like a small wall you build around your heart. You think it keeps you safe. But really, it keeps love out. He smiled sadly. "It's strange," he whispered. "The truth can break walls faster than anything." He took a deep breath and continued. "When you tell the truth, even if it hurts, you open the door for healing. You allow others to see who you really are." He sat down at his desk, opened his notebook again, and began to write. This time, not as a teacher, but as a storyteller. He wrote, "Honesty is the language of the heart. It may sound quiet, but it speaks the loudest." He paused, thinking. Then added, "A lie is heavy to carry. But the truth, it sets you free." He smiled and underlined that last sentence. As he closed the notebook, he thought about how far he'd come, from fear to courage, from guilt to peace. He realized this journey wasn't just about being honest with others. It was about being honest with himself. Sometimes we tell lies not because we want to hurt people, but because we're afraid of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. But Daniel had learned that the more you hide, the more you lose yourself. And the more you speak honestly, the more you find your real voice. He looked around the quiet classroom and whispered, "Maybe that's what life is, learning to speak our truth, little by little." That weekend, Daniel went to visit his parents. It had been a while since he saw them. They lived in a small house near the countryside, surrounded by green fields and a few tall trees. When he arrived, his mother opened the door with her familiar smile. "Daniel, you're home," she said joyfully. He hugged her tightly. "Hi, Mom. I missed you." His father came out from the garden, wiping his hands. He looked strong and quiet, just as always. "Good to see you, son," he said simply. Daniel nodded. "Good to see you too, Dad." They sat together for dinner that night. The food was warm, the air was full of soft conversation. But as they ate, Daniel looked at his parents and suddenly felt something deep, gratitude. After dinner, he told them everything. About the mistake, the lie, the fear, the confession, and how honesty changed everything. He expected anger or disappointment. But instead, his father smiled softly. "You know," his father said, "I made a mistake like that when I was young too." Daniel looked surprised. "Really?" His father nodded. "Yes. And it taught me the same thing, that truth may cost you something, but it gives you back your peace." His mother touched Daniel's hand gently. "We're proud of you," she said. "Not because you were perfect, but because you were honest." Daniel felt tears in his eyes. He didn't hide them. He let them fall freely. And as they fell, he realized he had finally come full circle. He had been honest with his students, with his colleagues, with his parents, and most importantly, with himself. That night, he sat outside under the stars. The sky was clear, the wind was gentle. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the crickets and the soft rustle of leaves. And then, quietly, he began to speak, not to anyone, but to life itself. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that honesty isn't just about telling the truth. It's about living the truth. It's about showing up as who you are even when it's hard." He looked up at the stars and smiled. They seemed to shine a little brighter that night. Now, my friend, as you listen to this story, maybe you feel something inside too. Maybe you remember a time when you were afraid to tell the truth. Maybe you remember how heavy it felt to hide something. Or maybe you remember the calm that came after you finally said what was real. That's the magic of honesty. It's not only about words, it's about freedom. It's about choosing to live without pretending. Let's say a few simple English phrases together. Repeat them slowly after me. Honesty makes my heart light. The truth may be difficult, but it heals. When I speak honestly, I grow stronger. Good. Now breathe in slowly. And breathe out gently. Feel how light you become when your words and your heart match. That's what Daniel felt too. That's what every honest person feels. Before we finish, think about this. Honesty isn't about never making mistakes. It's about facing them with courage. It's about admitting when you're wrong, forgiving yourself, and starting again. And that's what English learning is like too. Every time you make a mistake, you have two choices: hide it or face it. If you face it, if you speak honestly, if you keep trying, you grow. So don't be afraid to say, "I don't understand yet. I need more practice. I want to speak better." Because that honesty is the key that opens every door. Learning English, like living life, is not about being perfect. It's about being real. So keep speaking. Keep listening. Keep learning. And above all, keep being honest. Because honesty is not only the best policy, it is the best path to peace, connection, and confidence. And as we end this story, remember Daniel's words: peace is not the absence of mistakes. It is the presence of truth. So wherever you are, whoever you are, keep that truth close to your heart. Speak with honesty. Live with honesty. And let your English and your life shine with the quiet power of being real. Thank you for listening, my friend. This was Fluent English Journey, your space to listen, to feel, and to grow. Don't stop here. Every quiet day of practice builds your future voice. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep moving forward. You're growing even when it's silent. Good night. And remember, honesty is the best policy.